A new World Bank report is insisting that Nigeria must remove its fuel subsidy regime, increase its non-oil revenues, as well as strengthen its debt management and fiscal rules if it hopes to survive its economic challenges. This is included in the Nigeria Public Finance Review report launched in Abuja in collaboration with the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Arise correspondent Georgina Undukwe Ezianika tells us more.
While Nigeria has made some progress in socio-economic terms in recent years, its human capital development ranked 150 out of 157 countries in the World Bank's 2020 Human Capital Index. The country continues to face massive developmental challenges, including the need to reduce the dependency on oil and diversify the economy, as well as increase the country's revenue generation. This and many other issues have been highlighted in this report. The World Bank Country Director says this is the first time a report is being put together on the overall fiscal position of both the federal and state governments. The report shows that Nigeria's huge development financing needs qualitative human capital development.
Nigeria has not been able to afford what it needs to spend, what the government needs to spend to meet those basic development needs that only government can provide. There are all kinds of other areas, as the medium-term plan makes clear, all kinds of other areas where it's the private sector. Government needs to sort of not only get out of the way, kind of facilitate private firms to come in.
According to the World Bank report, Nigeria has one of the lowest public expenditure levels in the world and has the fourth lowest revenue per GDP ratio. The Bretton Woods institution says low public expenditure means low infrastructure provision for Nigerians. Now, to bridge this gap, the government and states are being advised to focus on ways to improve spending, increase revenue, spend more on human and fiscal capital, and strengthen institutions for more efficiency.
So there is a tremendous opportunity by putting more resources into critical public services, including especially health and education, where the current level of spending is very low, only about $22 per Nigerian per year on education, for example, in terms of both federal and state spending combined.
Officials of the Nigerian government here agree that the removal of fuel subsidy is crucial, but say it should be phased out gradually. They also believe that including property tax may be a way to tackle Nigeria's revenue challenges.
For you to take out subsidies in one fell swoop at this time, given a lot of the surround sound around a number of other challenges, we have to think through how best to take out subsidies. The ideal is simply announce that subsidies are gone and be done with it. However, the inflationary implications is one of those things that you really have to think about.
We certainly have to expand the tax net, block the leakages, and then deal with issues of evasion and non-compliance. We have to confront that very, very seriously. We then also, like I said, have to increase taxes.
Stakeholders here believe another way to improve Nigeria's non-oil revenue is by focusing on regulating the country's consumption patterns as it relates to what is imported into the country.
And in situations where you have oil and gas, that the main source of the FX suffers, then every sector suffers.
As Nigeria approaches the general elections next year, the report says the incoming government will have to tackle an increasing debt profile and declining oil revenues. The hope is that this report will spark a debate on how the federal government can spend better, increase revenue, and strengthen institutions, as well as effectively harness its revenues. Georgina Undukwe, Arise News.
All right, let's bring in the World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Shubham Chaudhry. Thank you very much. Good to see you again on News Night tonight. Well, it's one thing, for the World Bank to advise Nigeria to do away with fuel subsidy and all other things that just don't make sense for the economy, right away. But then again, on the other hand, it's another thing. What exactly are your recommendations on the issue of fuel subsidy? What alternatives are you putting on the table, that Nigeria can comfortably go by? And you talk about infrastructure, you connect the low government spending with low infrastructure. Right. Yet this government has borrowed so much in the name of closing infrastructure gap.
Yeah.
So I think, let me answer you in two parts. First, I do want to make clear that this has to be a consensus that between the government and people of Nigeria. Okay? Right now, I think all of you know this much better than I do. People of Nigeria do not trust that government will necessarily spend any government resources well. I think you just alluded to that, right? So I think the starting point has to be a conversation about, okay, what will it take for this trust to be rebuilt? A big part of that is to spend better by making sure that if whatever little money goes towards health programs, that actually results in primary healthcare facilities having the medicine, being open to kind of help mothers who are about to give birth, or school teachers showing up in primary schools around the country. That is always, has to be spent better. Public funds have to be spent better. But there's no getting away from the fact that Nigeria spends, even what it spends too little. Okay, so the examples that we give, if you look across other countries, Nigeria spends about $23 per capita per year on education. Mali next door spends $32. Okay? Indonesia, $124 per capita. If you go to South Africa, it's 300 something. So just the level of spending, public spending on the most basic investment that a country can make in its future, which is to make sure its children are educated. Nigeria is not spending enough. And even what little it's spending, it's not necessarily spending well. So part of what we're saying is, look, you have to have a conversation, somehow gain the trust so that the people think that, okay, if fuel subsidies are removed, the savings from that, which will be in the order of 5 trillion naira this year, possibly more next year, will be used for things that directly benefit the people, right? Now, we have suggested some things. Everyone knows what the needs are, whether it's from the local government level, where it's primary health care or water and sanitation, rural roads. So then you go to the states, what can states do? Help farmers connect to markets, provide all-season rural roads. We can provide agro-logistics centers. If you go to the national level, it's about security. It's about national highways, rail infrastructure. 6 trillion can go a long ways. Right. So we know what are the kinds of things Nigeria needs. Where the conversation needs to happen is, okay, if in fact PMS subsidies are removed, will there be visible, accountable ways in which government at all levels, local governments, states, the national, will actually do the things that the people are desperately calling out for?
Okay, very good foundation you've laid, but a lot of Nigerians are skeptical whenever the World Bank says, hey, remove this subsidy, remove that, and the rest, because particularly of
there's also the trust deficit.
Yeah, the trust deficit too from the Bretton Woods institution. I mean, the World Bank, the IMF. Let's take you back. Some 40 years ago, when the structural adjustment program was introduced, that it was the panacea that would lead us to socioeconomic El Dorado. But Nigeria never got there. Rather, was strangulated. The debt profile rose so much until the Paris Club and others, for the debt forgiveness and the rest, between 1999.
And we're back to where we started.
And it's like we're back again to square one. Some of your own medicines are...
So, look, we can talk about history, and it is a striking fact that Nigeria today, if you just look at one measure, real per capita incomes, okay, is where it was 40 years ago, in 1982. Okay, so that's a fact. We can talk about whether it was the structural adjustment program. So I wasn't here at that time, but I can tell you, even back then, and certainly not now, I don't see the role of institutions like the World Bank to dictate. We are here to support Nigeria. We're like a development cooperative. Nigeria is a member, as are 189 other countries. And our basic mission is to help our member countries eliminate extreme poverty, make lives better for the bottom half. What I aspire to is that we're seen as trusted partners. And trusted partners will sometimes say things that you may not like. And in that case, it's Nigeria's choice. I keep saying every time, it's Nigeria's choice. Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. It's the largest country in Africa. You know, it's a proud nation with a long history. Certainly, an institution like the World Bank cannot dictate to Nigeria. We can only offer our suggestions.
Like the suggestions you offered the years I talked about, the structural adjustment program.
Those were suggestions.
When
Nigeria was
they were
not
tied.
bound.
They were tied
There were
to.
yeah.
But
conditionalities.
this is I agree. But so this is the thing, that if we also, in this case, Nigeria has the choice to make its own decisions at all times.
Right.
So this is the point. And even now, and I actually look. Structural adjustment 40 years ago. I'm talking about Nigeria of today. Every Nigerian should ask himself or herself, okay, is the country where you'd like it to be? And how can Nigeria realize her true potential?
And that's the basic question.
Yes.
What exactly are the solutions that you're, bringing forward beyond just saying, look, take away the subsidy? What are the practical solutions, especially the low-hanging fruits? The
non-oil exports, how
yes.
it's really can be rejuvenated and the rest.
Right.
Okay, so it has to begin with things that we think are most critical, investing in Nigeria's people, especially the children. So your reporter mentioned the Human Capital Index. It's a very simple measure, saying a child born in Nigeria, when he or she grows up to enter the working labor force, how productive will they be relative to other countries? Workers, young people coming of working age in other countries. It turns out in Nigeria, the human capital, because of the state of primary healthcare, basic education, because you have 780,000 Nigerian children under the age of 5 who die every year from completely preventable reasons. You've got 15 million children out of school who don't have that, aren't given the opportunity to learn so that they can then realize their own potential. So those things have to be fixed, and those things do require funds, public funds. So the reason we keep coming back to fuel subsidies is because if you need financing to, make sure primary healthcare facilities, schools are there, where does that fund come from? Certainly, borrowing more is not the solution. You cannot do that indefinitely. So the resources have to come from elsewhere. One is you can decide: do we spend 6 trillion on
subsidy,
PMS subsidy, or do we spend 6 trillion on helping farmers, making sure every Nigerian child can reach their potential?
Well, this government has said, come June 2023. Subsidy will definitely be removed. What it means is that the government is kicking the can down the road and handing it over, that responsibility, to the next administration. What do you envisage for that, new government when it comes in place, especially on this issue of fuel subsidy? And then there is infrastructure gap of about 38 trillion naira. I mean, some say, well, Nigeria needs about $800 billion in the next 10 years. To close the infrastructure gap.
So the infrastructure part, I think a lot of it can happen through private investment being crowded in. So for example, we talk about 45% of the population in Nigeria does not have access to electricity. Okay? That's one of the largest numbers, 80 million people or 85 million people. Many of them live in remote communities, in rural areas. For them, solar mini-grids would be a solution, right? Standalone. You don't have to worry about extending the transmission lines, etc., out to remote parts. And solar mini-grids are something that a lot of private firms around the world are ready to come in and start producing, and communities are willing to pay. So a lot of that infrastructure gap can be met by crowding in private investment, but then that's where the role of government is not to finance, but to just have a level playing field, provide the certainty, regulatory and policy certainty, and foreign exchange as well where necessary. But where government really, only government can play a role is investing in people and core infrastructure like rural roads, etc. It all begins with having the funds, then it is using them well.
To prioritize the funds.
To prioritize and use them well. We talk about, in the report, we talk about recurrent spending. Can government cut down its...
more than capital expenditure.
Yes, and a big part of it now is interest. Okay, so there are many aspects to this, getting the fiscal house in order to serve the people.
It's not a complex situation. Okay. It's determination and really put the priorities right.
So you asked me about June. June, yes. I hope it'll happen, but I think the conversation needs to begin now so that so it doesn't get politicized and further get kicked down the road, right?
All right.
The people have to believe that those funds, that 6 trillion, will be used for their benefit.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. World Bank Country Director for Nigeria, Shubham Shukri. Thank you very much for joining us in News.